in international circles as if things were quite okay, but then, over the last 10, 15 years, things got worse, deteriorated. That is not the case. Since the very inception of the Republic, since the declaration of the Republic in 1923, and here I specifically mean the so-called courts of independence, right? We have been observing, experiencing how the law has been used as a political tool, sometimes as a weapon against the opposition, minorities, those who are different from the dominant Turkish national identity. So that is one thing we need to remember, that it has a very long history. It's not just the last 10, 15 years. I was a member of parliament between 2013 and 2023, and in that period I was also representing my party at the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is the institution dealing with questions of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Hence, the case of detentions, arbitrary detention, torture, pre-trial detention. All of these issues are very much debated at the Council of Europe, particularly in the Parliamentary Assembly. Turkey was included back into the monitoring procedure in 2017, mostly because of this kinds of practices, by which I mean the use of law as a political tool to repress the opposition, the political opposition, the social opposition, and particularly the Kurds, because they have been the most kind of powerfully organized force criticizing the role of President Erdogan. Now President Erdogan, but in the 90s there were other presidents and prime ministers. Before them there were other, sometimes military commanders. So I would like to stress that this is not just a question about Erdogan and his rule over the last 20 years or so. It is a state policy. The law is a machine. It works like a machine, and pre-trial detention, administrative detention, or arbitrary detention is just one but very powerful mechanism to silence oppositional voices, progressive voices in the country. The European Court of Human Rights has at least twice convicted Turkey, invoking Article 18 of the European Convention of Human Rights. It's a technical jargon. Let me just very briefly clarify. Mainly, the European Court of Human Rights said that the Turkish courts are being politically used. In fact, the decisions, the rulings that they make are political decisions, not legal decisions, not based on legal evidence, but to destroy the political opposition. One case was, of course, the case of Mr. Selahattin Demirtas, who was the leader of my party, the People's Democratic Party, of which I was a deputy chair for 8 years. Mr. Demirtas is still in prison despite a 160-page conviction written by the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights. Mainly, the European Court of Human Rights says that Turkey uses the law as a weapon against the opposition, and for this, Turkey may be even kicked out of the Council of Europe because the violation of European Convention of Human Rights is sufficient reason actually for a member state to get kicked out. That is one. And the other case is the case of Osman Kavala. He's also still in prison. For him, there is also a very powerful, strong decision of the European Court of Human Rights. And there are tens and thousands of other cases pending now. So my experience with the arbitrary detention was actually, I was a member of parliament in Bingöl, which is a smaller town, and then I was a member of parliament representing Diyarbakir. Every single person I have worked with, as we have the co-chair system, we are very much gender egalitarian. Our party requires actually that kind of a structure, like we have one female and one male co-chair. in every district, every province, every organ of our party. So I have worked with probably, let me just do the math a little, maybe 8, 10, then maybe around 20 co-chairs over 8 years. And every single one of them was detained, sent to prison for some time. The majority of them were later acquitted of all charges, but each one stayed in prison for 2 years, 3 years, sometimes 5 years, without any conviction, right? And this is, I mean, normally you would say that under conditions of emergency rule, which was in effect in Turkey between 2016 and 2018, in that period there were a lot of arbitrary detentions. One would expect those kinds of practices to stop when emergency rule is lifted, which happened in 2018, but it did not stop there. The fact is that the emergency rule decrees, the government decrees, were later turned into legislative bills, so they became a part of the Turkish law, which means that emergency rule, which should be an exceptional measure under exceptional circumstances, became the norm, the rule in Turkey. So we live actually under a permanent emergency rule, because all of the Turkish law later included those exceptional governmental decrees and turned that into normal law. So that is the situation. And if the government is not happy with a person, I mean, they will definitely find an excuse for you to send you to jail. Over the last 10 years, though, something extra happened. The so-called coup attempt in 2016. We still don't know what happened behind, there really, what was the situation. Whatever the reason, whoever the people, maybe, behind that whole thing. But we know that the government used that coup attempt as a golden opportunity to destroy the opposition. The Kurds, yes, progressive people, even liberals, some Democrats, plus the Fethullah Gülen community, which was actually one of the key targets of the government for a couple of years, starting with 2016. They were previously allies with each other, but then things changed, and then the government also used, interestingly, some of the mechanisms that were used by the judges before them, and they started using the same mechanisms against members of the Fethullah Gülen community. So currently what we are at really now, sometimes I listen to human rights debates, and I see that human rights debates they occur within a context that is totally depoliticized, as if all of these human rights violations, they just happen in air or without any political context to it. But the thing is, these human rights violations, all of them, they have a historical and political background to them. The ones that I'm mentioning now, like People's Democratic Party, my party, although it is known as the pro-Kurdish party in Turkey, it's more inclusive. We do have other elements of the society. We have the minorities, we have the women's movement, we have Turkish liberals, we have like independent people, academics. So it's more kind of an umbrella organization, I would say, trying to represent multiple sectors of the society. So we became the target of the government simply because we were critical of the government's Kurdish policy. I mean, that was it. And we took a strong stance against President Erdogan's rule in 2015, and since then, at least 10,000 people were arrested, detained, sent to prison. Maybe those many people also left the country. Over the last 10 years, it has been a very, very massive crackdown there. And so the point I'm trying to make is all of these rights violations, which sound legalistic, right? Individuals have rights and they are being violated. But all of these are happening within a political context. And the ones that I am mentioning, they do happen within the political context of the Kurdish question, the so-called Kurdish question. I'm just wrapping up. The Kurdish question started with the declaration of the Turkish Republic, 1923. It started, and it hasn't been resolved over the last 50 years. It has cost probably more than 50,000 lives, the majority of them being Kurdish. And during the 90s, emergency rule practices, extrajudicial killings, I mean, so many human rights violations happened to repress the democratic debate and resolution of the Kurdish issue. And now we are at some crossroads again. The Turkish government and the state institutions are still very, I would say, aggressive when it comes to the democratic opposition and the Kurds as well. But we want to be a little bit optimistic. I think the next speaker will be talking about the new process that may happen in Turkey. But if the government is able to somehow reposition itself and re-engage the Kurdish issue in a political way, rather than militarization and killings and bombings and arbitrary detentions and torture, if they stop using repressive political means and address the Kurdish issue in a more democratic, peaceful, and political way, then the whole context in which these human rights violations are happening will disappear. So if we want to put an end to human rights violations, arbitrary detention being one of them, we need to find a permanent democratic political solution to the Kurdish issue. There may be an opportunity for that. I will stop here. I think the next speaker will be talking about the actual process with the Kurdish conflict in Turkey. And in the Q&A session, if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer. Thank you so much.
I thank you for your testimony due to your political experience in Turkey. And I should have made two announcements at the beginning of the session. The first one is technical, in the sense that only the organizers can take pictures and videos in the room. So please don't use your phone for taking pictures. And the second announcement is just to apologize the absence of Mr. Hani, former member of the UN Committee Against Torture, who was called for at the last very minute for a meeting in the office of the High Commissioner, so he cannot be with us today. And now, as you can see, there is an empty place here for Mrs. Pinar Selek, which is a quite particular case, but emblematic in the use of justice in Turkey. And we will present his case, and I will ask a Kurdish woman to speak about Pinar Selek. Please, you have the floor.
Hello everyone. The news of 10 days ago highlighted an emblematic case of the Turkish authorities' relentless pursuit of those who investigate and denounce abuses of power and violations of fundamental rights and freedoms in Turkey. The case of Pinar Selek, a sociologist who has been conducting research on minorities in Turkey, particularly Kurds and women, for some 30 years. Pinar Selek has published a number of books and articles dealing with construction of male hegemonic domination in Turkey, the Armenian genocide of 1915, and her experience in Turkish prisons. At the end of 1990s, Pinar Selek began her research into the Kurdish question and made several trips to Kurdistan, France, and Germany to conduct around 60 interviews for an oral history project. On 11 July 1998, she was arrested by the Istanbul police and tortured to force her to give the names of the people she had interviewed. In a book published in 2021, Pinar Selek describes the treatment she received in prison. She says, I am quoting, "I didn't eat, I I hardly drank. The worst thing was when I was suspended from a wall with my hands pulled up and glued to my lower back, and everything cracked and tore. My spine broke. That was the worst. End of quote. Naked and blindfolded, she was beaten day and night. Her torturers inflicted electric shocks on her ears, breasts, and head. With a gun to her head, she resisted and sometimes fainted. Quote, they tried all sorts of things on me. I resisted by chance. Many of my friends didn't succeed and were despised for it. This double punishment is unfair. End of quote. She resisted, and a new form of torture was used against her while being in prison. She was accused of having placed a bomb which on 9 July 1998 killed 7 people and injured more than 100 at the spice market in Istanbul. Despite several expert reports certifying that it was not a bomb but the accidental explosion of a gas bottle, this was the start of a politico-judicial prosecution that is now in its 27th year. She spent 2.5 years in prison, during which time she wrote extensively. All her writings, except for one, which was saved by a cellmate, were sequestered and burned. In December 2000, she was finally released, and she used her name to organize a major women's meeting for peace in Diyarbakır. This first mobilization was followed by other meetings in Istanbul, Batman, and Konya. In 2006, she was finally acquitted, bringing down one by one all the charges based on false testimony, extracted under torture, and the fabrication of false evidence. But the public prosecutor appealed against the verdict, and in April 2007, the Court of Cassation agreed with the prosecutor and overturned the acquittal. She was acquitted again in 2008, but a third appeal by the Court of Cassation overturned the verdict and forced her to leave Turkey. In February 2011, she was acquitted a third time, but in an extremely rare event in Turkish jurisprudence, the prosecutor appealed to the Court of Cassation also for the third time. In January 2013, the 12th Istanbul Court, which was reorganized, overturned its own acquittal decision and sentenced her to life imprisonment. Her lawyers appealed, denouncing the illegality of the proceedings and obtained the annulment of conviction from the 9th Court of Cassation in June 2014. The trial, which started again at the 15th Criminal Court, resulted in a fourth acquittal in December 2014. But the prosecutor appealed again. This marked the start of a long period of uncertainty as she awaited the Supreme Court's decision, which finally came 8 years later. In June 2022, the Court of Cassation overturns the fourth acquittal and requested a life sentence. In January 2023, the Istanbul Assize Court issued an arrest warrant with immediate imprisonment. A new trial was due to begin in March 2023 in Istanbul, but in view of the strong international mobilization and the approach of presidential elections in Turkey, the judiciary postponed the date to the month of September, and in September, the trial was once again postponed until June 2024. A few days before the June hearing, a fictitious document was added to the case file, falsely accusing Pınar Selek of having taken part in a conference allegedly organized by the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. when in fact it was an academic conference organized by two French universities and two French public research bodies. After a vigorous protest and a detailed explanation which was immediately sent to the Turkish Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Justice by the official organizers of that conference, the judge once again postponed the decision to a hearing which took place on 7 February 2025 in Istanbul. Following this hearing, the trial has been once more postponed until 25 April 2025.
I thank you. So the case of Pina Selek is a particular one and very emblematic. Pina Selek now lives in exile in France. An international arrest warrant with an extradition request via Interpol has been issued against her by the Turkish authorities, which prevents her from leaving French territory. She is resisting the psychological torture represented by 27-year persecution of her and her family. She also has to deal with death threats from far-right Turkish militants, and therefore she can no longer move around alone. If Pina Selek may have been lucky enough to leave Turkey, which she no longer recognizes as her country, hundreds of women and men are imprisoned in violation of their freedom of expression and association. Whether or not they are guaranteed a fair trial, they are frequently the victims of torture. The emblematic case of Pina Selek also raises the fundamental question of the independence of the Turkish judicial system. And now I will turn the floor to Mr. Adem Uzun, who is a member of the Kurdistan National Congress spokesperson. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much having me. Thank you very much for all of you. So we are speaking about in a country which has some structural problems, not beginning from the last decades, but from the beginning of its foundation. So the Turkish Republic, unfortunately, was created, founded on one nation, one flag, one language. Everything was one, and all the other ethnicities, minorities, and religion groups were being not accepted, were being criminalized, or were being denied, and the state has fought against them. And everything in the state itself, the policy, the economy, social structure, the governments, everything, also their diplomacy was based on this denial. Because of this denial, there were being a lot of problems, a lot of discrimination, a lot of violence, a lot of detention and killings, what we are speaking now about. And because of this denial, some people resist, especially in the last decades, the Kurds. Because of this denial, it came to this resistance. And unfortunately, to this war we are now in. War between the Kurds and the Turkish state. So the war we are now facing in Turkey is a result of this policy. It's a lack of democracy, lack of acknowledgement of other, the rights of others, and related to these state policy, we have a legal framework in Turkey. We have a constitution in Turkey which is doing the same, and the courts, the bureaucracy, the military, the governments, every structures or every bodies are acting related to this constitution, which is, of course, not only a constitution against the others living in Turkey, other minorities, other nations, other religion groups, also against its own people, because it's against democracy, because it's against human rights, because it's against of free of expression, because it's against some criteria where the people can benefit from. So as a result of these, unfortunately, we have now a political, social, economical, historical, and democratic problem in Turkey, which is affecting not only the people living in Turkey, also their neighbors. Their neighbors in Middle East and their neighbors in Europe. So finding a solution to that question, to that problem, will for sure, and everybody, not only me, everybody is convinced of for sure given a direction towards democracy in Turkey. There have been several attempts by the Kurdish side to find a democratic, peaceful solution. There have been several attempts to declare a ceasefire. There have been several attempts to have political process with Turkey. There have been several negotiations opportunities, which I, by myself, was also a part of. We met Turkish authorities from 2009 to 2011 for negotiations process, but because the Turkish state has not accepted the social, political, and democratic rights for the Kurds, it doesn't came to an end. Then there will be some other negotiations process with the Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan from 2013, 2015. So because of the same reason that the Turkish state was strategically not ready to go for a peaceful solution, it collapsed. So in the last 10 years, from 2015 till now, there was a big fight against the Kurds. Not only against the Kurds, against the minorities, against the people who wants democracy in Turkey itself, also abroad, in Syria against the Kurds, in Iraq against the Kurds. It was heavy war. But things have changed in Middle East. The circumstances have changed. The crisis in Middle East is deepening. The Kurdish problem is not solved. And fortunately, in the end, some crises in Turkey, which are part of the current government, has acknowledged there is a problem we have to deal with in different way. So it was the first time that the ultra-nationalist party, who is part of the Erdogan's government, made a call to the PKK to make a call for disarmament and for solution. It was the first time. Was this call made by this ultra-nationalist party leader in cooperation with the government? It is not clear, but later we have seen even Erdogan is agreed with that. So the Kurds who knew that Turkey needs democracy, Middle East needs stability, and the main problem of Turkey is democracy and human rights and social rights. They used that opportunity, and the imprisoned Kurdish leader, who is in prison since 26 years and isolated from all his rights. Even the intervention from the Council of Europe, from the CPT, from UN and others, who have criticized Turkey to lift this isolation, Turkey didn't listen to anybody. But because he has seen this opportunity, he made a call on 27th of February this month, said, and unilaterally said, after the call came by the Turkish authorities to find a solution, we are ready to lay down the arms. We are ready to find a new solution under the circumstance for a political and legal framework. This call was made by him. It was welcomed globally. It was welcomed among all the Kurds, and it is fortunately welcome among the Turkish authorities, the opposition, and the government too. It was only welcome. But since that day, we have now the 17 or 18 days passed. But the Turkish state, Turkish government, still didn't make any positive steps, because the PKK, just 2 days after the declaration of its leader, made a declaration, said, we agree with our leader, we are fully behind him to come to a conclusion for negotiations, for a process, for democratization, for the solution of the question. We declare a ceasefire, giving the circumstance, giving the possibilities, giving the opportunities to go ahead with the proposals or with the call our leader has made. But during these 18 days, Turkish state has not stopped its operation, has not stopped its bombing, has not stopped its massacre, has not changed any law, has not made any positive steps. There are some meetings between the Kurdish delegation who are meeting Öcalan and who are meeting Turkish political parties, including the government. There are still some meetings. Even today we had some meetings, but on the practical side, we have not seen any positive steps by Turkey. So now the question is, this call by Öcalan, the PKK founder, the leader of the Kurdish people, was welcomed by UN, by US, by all the countries, China, India, Germany, and all the countries was welcomed. Why? Because that is a call for democracy, this is a call for negotiations, that is a call for peace and democracy. And the call by Öcalan was called Peace and Democratic Society, call for peace and democratic society. So it was welcomed by all these, which is very positive. But now, since these 18 days, nothing happened. Now our call is to all these countries who have welcomed this call by Kurdish leader, please, please, if you really want to have a democratic Turkey, if you really want to have a peaceful democratic solution, if you want a stability in Middle East, because Turkey is using the PKK as pretext to attack Syria, to attack Iraq, to attack all the other countries. If you want a stability, and if you want Turkey to be more democratized, make pressure on Turkey to make some positive steps. And secondly, the call again on Turkish authorities. If you really want to democratize Turkey, which you have realized that Turkey is not democratic, making a call to a party like the PKK to solve the question means you want to make some steps towards democracy, and also you have realized that your constitution, your policy is not democratic enough. You want to improve it. So if this is in your benefit, you have to make your homework. You have to make some positive steps. The first step, what can be done would be to give Mr. Abdullah Öcalan the opportunity to act freely, like Mr. Mandela, to communicate with his party, to communicate with the opposition, to communicate with the public opinion. He has to lead the negotiations process because he made the call, he took the responsibility, he has convinced his organization, but he has to finish this call. He has worked towards a solution. Without his freedom, without his conditions being changed to act free, to communicate, I don't think this process will be successful. And secondly, the PKK made a ceasefire to prepare itself for disarmament, but they cannot make some practical steps when Turkey is still daily attacking with its jets, with its drones, with its military, with its tanks, with its jets. They cannot go ahead with their Congress, or they cannot go ahead to make the necessary preparation to change or to disarm. So Turkey has also seized the fire to give the opportunity for a peaceful solution, which is very important. And when this process goes well and Turkey fulfill its obligations and steps required from its side, I think that will not only be in benefit for the Kurds and the Turks, that will be in benefit for the whole region, which is in a crisis, that will be in benefit for the democratization, that will also help for the stability, that will also help the European countries to get better communication with Turkey for their own interests. Any attempt from any European countries with Turkey is blocked because Turkey is demanding these countries to do something against the Kurds. Because of that policy, a lot of European countries have also unfortunately criminalized the Kurds, terrorized the Kurds, arresting the Kurds, abandoning the Kurds. Because of this policy, when this problem is solved, so I think even the European countries, they will not have such kind of problems they are facing now. Thank you very much.
I thank you. And now we have some time for comments or questions from the floor. So I open the floor to the audience. If anyone wants to make a comment or raise a question, and please introduce yourself. If there are no questions, maybe I will ask again Mr. Ozoy if he wants to complement his presentation.
Yeah, maybe not too much, but just in addition. I mean, not just as a politician, but as a Kurdish person, as an academic who worked on the issue, I would like to also stress that the process that may happen in Turkey, which was initiated by Mr. Abdullah Öcalan, is really a golden opportunity. And it doesn't come always. This is a very tough, very difficult situation for the Middle East. On the one hand, we have the whole Middle East, from Palestine to Iraq, Iran, Yemen, everywhere. I mean, it's just a battlefield. The whole region is a battlefield. And in Europe, we have a lot of problems as well, and migration, and racism, security questions, they are among things. That is the other problem. And Turkey is kind of a buffer zone between the Middle East and Turkey and Europe. But the problem is Turkey, as a member of the NATO and as a country who has ties, strong ties with the European Union, such as Customs Union, a country that has been a member of the Council of Europe since the 1950s. If Turkey and the Kurds, if they can cut a deal, like a peaceful process to address the Kurdish issue, I think I would like to just support and underline what Mr. Uzun just said. This is a golden opportunity for everybody to win, Turkey, Kurds, Europe, and the Middle East. I mean, there is a possibility to stabilize a whole geography and also to prevent the kind of possible threats, problems that are coming from that part of the world that we call the Middle East into European countries. And I do think that, I mean, Turkey has been able to maintain its war against the Kurds thanks to mostly the European countries, the NATO, for example, where I also worked at this parliamentary assembly. I mean, the Europe and the NATO and a lot of countries have been waging a war against the Kurdish people who are just demanding some fundamental cultural rights, collective rights as a people, and some degree of decentralization, which is an autonomous existence, which is, I mean, you know, it's even a joke sometimes to talk about autonomous existence. Look at, we are in Geneva, I don't know, I mean, you have some crazy degree of autonomy here. The whole Europe is autonomous, you know, Switzerland here and there. But in Turkey, when you speak even about autonomy or decentralization, is a big, big issue. You are accused of being separatist, terrorist, you go to jail. I don't know how many court cases against me, just simply because saying that we need some degree of decentralization and some cultural rights for the Kurdish issue. But now that the leader of ultra-nationalist party and President Erdogan, he's a little bit cautious, he doesn't want to take a lot of responsibility, I am observing. But if it seems that Mr. Abdullah Öcalan and the ultra-nationalist leader there, and a lot of people in Turkey, they are up to something, they really want to do something. And it is really high time, both for the European institutions and the UN and any transnational body to kind of, in a constructive way, to help, to push the process forward. Because if we fail this process too, if we are not able to have a peaceable solution to the Kurdish issue, we suspect, we are afraid of actually more chaotic and turbulent and violent times are ahead. So it is a golden opportunity that the Turkish government and anybody else who is in favor of peace and democracy, we shouldn't miss. We cannot miss this opportunity. Thank you.
I thank you. And I don't know if here there is a question. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you much. My name is Ricardo Espinoza. I'm the director of an NGO, International Association for Human Rights Advocacy in Geneva. We have seen more and more in the parliament, Mr. Omar Farouk Gegeligoglu, who takes more and more positions in favor of human rights in Turkey. He mentions frequently United Nations positions and sometimes position of the European Court of Human Rights. Has he strong reports? Is this helping your cause, the cause of victims?
So you mean Mr. Gegeligoglu?
Yeah.
Omar Farouk Gegeligoglu.
He is actually my colleague. I was the deputy chair of the party. We were like members of parliament together for 5 years, so he's a member of my party. He was. Now, of course, the party changed the name, but you know, it is the same. And he has been very, very active in the human rights circles. And yes, even before becoming a member of parliament, he was a physician by profession. And he was also the chair of a human rights organization, Muslim that we call it. And then he became a member of parliament, and he's continuing very high quality human rights work there as well. Yes, definitely, but sometimes he too, actually, we kind of criticize both the United Nations and the Council of Europe and the European Court of Human Rights. Somehow, all of these institutions which are supposed to work solely on grounds of law and democracy and the rule of law, but we are seeing that actually these institutions are also becoming politicized because of Turkey's importance for the NATO security, migration, whatever. So unfortunately, yes, and he's also, as far as I know, very well connected with a lot of circles, like transnational circles promoting human rights. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know if there are any other questions or comments from the floor. Otherwise, I may ask Mr. Uzun to update the audience about the judicial situation of the Kurdish mayor that have been dismissed and the Kurdish parliamentarians, politicians in the Turkish prisons.
Yeah, thank you very much. There is a law in Turkey which is called terror law. So everybody who speaks out for democracy, or in opposition to the government, or in opposition to the president, or for the Kurdish cause, for the minority rights, for the religion rights, for social rights, for environmental rights, even for environment, is labeled as a terrorist, and is charged under this terror law. So these mayors the same, the deputies the same, the political activists the same, human rights activists the same. So this terror law has to change. But it seems Turkey is not ready to change it. But now, with the call made by Mr. Abdullah Öcalan, the Kurdish leader, to solve the Kurdish question, to solve the main strategical problems in Turkey, and to make and step from their sides to take the risk, because it's a risky step too. So when Turkey accepted to go and to negotiate or to make some steps from their side and to welcome this call to change something and to come an agreement, that means Turkey has to change. Turkey will change. This anti-terror law will lift. We will not have an anti-terror law anymore. Turkey will not use this pretext terror anymore. Kurds are giving this opportunity now from their own side too. Just maybe one sentence. We had the same situation in the beginning of the millennium. Öcalan made again a proposal. He again made a proposal to withdraw his forces from Turkey. And he called for end of war. You know what happened at that time? The European Union has put the PKK in the terrorist list. I said to them by myself, 2002, I met all of them, I said, listen, the PKK is going to dissolve itself, PKK is going to abandon, PKK is going to finish the war. Why you are putting the PKK, which is dissolving itself, to the list of terrorists? Do you don't want a peace agreement or instability and PKK which is abandoned the arms? They kept silent. So therefore, now we have the same situation after 25 years, 23 years. Our real call is to the European countries that welcomed this appeal by Mr. Abdullah Öcalan, which made us very, very happy. Please, let's do not repeat the same mistakes. Let's make more efforts that both parties can come together and find a solution with the help of these countries, including the UN. Thank you.
I thank you, and with